I think we're standing at the door of one of the greatest challenges to this country, certainly in generations. Remember, we haven't had any sort of bloodshed on U.S. soil since, you know, many, many years ago, since probably some of the riots back in the 20s and 30s over all sorts of union disputes and things like that. And the truth is that we haven't seen anything to the degree that we're seeing now in terms of just division and anger between two different main factions of the country, probably since the first Civil War. So many people, and you don't have to trust me. I mean, you don't have to trust me on this. You can go look it up. Many people are predicting we're going to see a major civil conflict here in the next few years. And look, I think you have to keep your sense of humor about it. That's why I think that you need to get your Touched by a Biden t-shirt. And I would say while supplies last, but the truth is these are made to order. So just look at the site. I will put a link in the description and you can buy that. The other thing I want you to do before I get to the main topic, which is how Joe Biden will destroy the liberal ideal by going after conservatives and other opponents, I do want to ask you to go to this email sign up and subscribe to my newsletter, which is Razor Sharp News Chronicle, and just keep in touch. And you don't have to pay anything. You don't have to do anything besides click on it, read. Some of the videos will be on there. I don't know if my R-rated, like expletive-filled videos will be on it, but maybe they will, maybe they won't. I think that when we're living in a time when you don't know who to trust, it's important for people to really look at the audience that is listening to them and make sure that they know they can always ask questions and they can always know that I don't necessarily have the answer. And therefore, unlike a lot of the people, I watch Crowder stream, I watch a lot of these other places, I think they do a good job. I am not going to pretend to know what's going to happen as far as the court cases, as far as the recounts. I don't know. I have things that I suspect might happen, but I am working under the assumption right now, unfortunately, that Joe Biden will be the next president and Kamala Harris will very swiftly be the next president after that. So besides that, I want you also to subscribe to me on Odyssey. You can find my channel on it. It is called Bold Like a Leopard, just like on YouTube. I actually, for some reason, have two Odyssey/library channels. So whether you're on library or Odyssey, it's the exact same channel. So don't worry about it. I also have a channel on BitChute, which is pretty much the best place in terms of staying abreast of stuff. It's just the uploads sometimes are slower, and the same thing with Rumble. So you can choose from all of those or just one of them, or mix and match, see which one you like more. I personally like Odyssey a little better, but BitChute is perfectly fine, especially if you are on the go. It is more functional than ever on mobile. They just don't have downloads. Now, the topic of the day, after my introduction, is how, as liberals, you should be very, very disturbed about what you're in store for as Joe Biden comes into office. If he goes into office, and we're working under the assumption that he will be the next president. I know some people might not be accepting it yet. Maybe it won't happen, and I would be very happy if it didn't. But I am not going to delude you into thinking that I can give you a path for that happening. But I do want to let you know that it is awful news that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will become president for people who are not necessarily conservative, people who consider themselves to be liberal or progressive or merely independent. You are in for some very, very rough times. And the truth is that there are some people who I would say they're still on the ideological left. They are massive, massive opponents of Donald Trump, and they are calling foul on it. So I will run through them. First of all, you have Majid Nawaz. Now, I want to say here, I do believe personally that there was fraud on a systematic scale in some sort of concerted effort. I'm not going to go through it today. You can find it elsewhere. I think Newsmax is a good place to go. I think Steven Crowder is a good place to go. Blaze TV. Um, there are people talking about it. Unfortunately, the main networks, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, all of the mainstream communications have worked in lockstep. Even the New York Post, which only a few days ago was talking about the seriousness of the allegations concerning Biden's son Hunter, is now operating under the assumption that he has won the election, and they're behaving as if those of us that are questioning many of the issues that are involved in it are a bunch of conspiracy theorists. No, we want to know that an election that took so much effort, sucked up a lot of money, was basically blared into people's ears for months and months, with people being reminded to vote, people being told, at subway stations and in waiting rooms at the doctor, go vote, and etc. Now we want to know how many of those votes came out on one side and how many on the other. And it's not a conspiracy theory to demand that information. So thankfully, Majid Nawaz, he's a liberal Democrat from England. They have a party there called the Liberal Democrats. He's considered to be one of the more staunch Remainers, one of the people who supported remaining in the EU during Brexit. He has come out and he said that he does not believe most of these figures. And he's saying, this is the latest U.S. election tally from Real Clear Politics for those still bothered. Biden is 11 below the 270 threshold. They haven't included Pennsylvania due to the pending Supreme Court decision. Note the count is still ongoing and many court cases are pending. And then he says, so many people clutching at straws here. The issue is not about whether RCP first called it and retracted it. The real issue is why they still haven't called it. Focus on substance, please. So what he's saying is just pure and simple. I don't have to reinterpret it as Kathy Newman did to Jordan Peterson. Now, maybe three years ago, if you remember that interview. Mr. Nawaz is saying that they have not called the race. They can't call the race. The media does not decide who wins the election. The legal authorities have to do that. It's not something that we delegate towards multinational corporations like Time Warner and Comcast and Disney that own most of these cable and broadcast TV networks, as well as many of the newspapers around the country. And he actually talks about how if the roles were reversed here in the UK with Brexit, okay? And this is something people have to remember. Like, I know that some of you people, like me, Americans, don't want to talk about places that you've never been to, but this is something that you could have easily followed only a couple years ago. It says here, the roles were reversed here in the UK with Brexit. We went to court to reinstitute Parliament and more. Gina Miller was hailed a hero. Gina Miller, for those who don't know, was a woman who sued the government in the UK, claiming that leaving the EU through Brexit would violate her civil rights. And he says, Gina Miller was hailed a hero. I called her that too. The quote, sore losers are now calling others sore losers for doing exactly what we did. Go to court. The hypocrisy stinks. I am, ecstatic. Majid Nawaz disagreed with him on a lot of things, always respected him on most of the things he said. And he is talking again about how there are all of these computer glitches that have come out that, strangely, they all favor the Democrat. So I do think he's owed at least some kudos. Majid Nawaz, another person on the liberal side, Jonathan Turley, is saying at a minimum there should be an agreement. We should look at the votes.
Joe Biden now declared the president-elect of the United States, but votes are still being tallied across the country as the president's legal team vows action in key states, including a new lawsuit in Pennsylvania tomorrow. Our next guest says America should welcome review for close counts. Here to discuss is Fox News contributor and George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley. Jonathan, thanks so much for being here with us. If we might, let's start with sort of setting the stage. I know this isn't a legal concept. It's not even circumstantial evidence, but dealing with an unprecedented level of mail-in balloting and questions in some cities that have had problems with corruption in the past, I think, would it not be appropriate for everyone to look at this at least with a skeptical eye to start?
Well, at a minimum, I think there should be agreement that we should look at the votes. You know, we're just completing the tabulation stage. We haven't even entered the canvassing stage. Much of the evidence of voter fraud would not be readily available during tabulation. And indeed, much of this information is being held by election officials. And so you would think that both parties would agree that we should look at these allegations. We're seeing a number of affidavits coming out with sworn statements that they witnessed voter fraud. Now, that may not be enough. Many of those are episodic. We're looking for something more systemic, something that could alter the outcome of a given state. And we still have not seen that evidence. There's no basis right now to suggest that Joe Biden is not the president-elect and that he secured this position through voter fraud. But the point is the unknowables. You know, we have a history in this country of election problems. 1960, President Kennedy is widely viewed by some historians, I should say by some historians, not to have been elected. You know, there were allegations that he secured that narrow victory through voter fraud by the Daily Machine in Chicago as well as in Texas. Of course, in 2000, there was the allegation in Florida. Later studies suggested that Al Gore may have won Florida. So there's a lot of examples where we were a bit premature.
Jonathan,
and we have to get it right.
So that was Professor John Turley, and I think having him criticize this process so strongly, but with very measured tones and an eye towards past examples, I think is certainly something that Democrats, they don't want people to talk about. John Turley was a huge critic of the Bush administration during the Guantanamo Bay era. He was a major critic of the Obama administration due to NSA surveillance. Under the Trump administration, he started to realize that the Democratic Party will not go back to the fight for civil liberties and personal freedoms. And he was a defender of Trump during the impeachment hearings. And in many cases, he has broken with the far left. Certainly, this is someone who would be one of the liberal voices saying to the Democrats, pump the brakes. And I'm talking about Democrat voters and Democrat politicians. Don't go through with this sham of a process where you tell people don't recount, don't go through the courts, don't do all of the necessary processes in order to ascertain what actually happened. And their decision to ignore that, well, it could come back to bite them in the ass. And I think that there will be, if this goes the wrong way for the Democrats, there will be a lot of infighting that will certainly complicate their efforts to rebuild the party, whatever the case is, whether Biden takes control or whether Trump remains in the White House. Other people who have criticized it, who are traditionally liberals, are people like Glenn Greenwald. And he's saying, I was going to point to the paradox that the New York Times has become the arm of the DNC while simultaneously continuing its traditional historic role of being the mouthpiece of the CIA and U.S. foreign policy, but then realized that's not a paradox but a redundancy. And then he said this before that. He said, if you file lawsuits in a duly constituted court asserting legal rights to contest a certified legal outcome, that isn't remotely close to a, quote, coup. And anyone using that word is reckless. It'd be a coup if he refused to leave power after his legal recourse was exhausted. He should say, it says resource, but it should be it should be recourse. Um, so a lot of what we're talking about here is the issue where Democrats are starting to realize that the Biden administration is not going to be their friend. I actually have a piece that I'm about to submit probably in the next few days, talking a lot about why the Democrats are going to have what I call Biden remorse. Here it says, he says, Obama officials, this is Glenn Greenwald again. Glenn Greenwald, a very far left person, somebody whose personal politics I staunchly disagree with, but he says Obama official Ben Rhodes admits Biden camp is already working with foreign leaders, exactly what Michael Flynn did. This is a person who's still technically under trial for something that was trumped up charges that there was virtually no evidence of, that was basically cooked up in order to, get him out of the administration. He was indicted on a technicality. They forced him to plead guilty through his lawyers, his original lawyers, and admit to a crime that he did not commit, because the FBI itself, in its records, said that Michael Flynn did not lie. And then later, Andrew McCabe, the acting head of the FBI, changed it. He changed it, and he became an indicted co-conspirator because of a semantic issue revolving around his phone call with the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak. Biden himself is already doing what Michael Flynn was doing in 2016, but much more egregiously. They're just admitting it, right? So anyway, there are many people who are starting to realize, and I think certainly Glenn Greenwald realized this a while ago, that the Biden administration is an enemy of the ideas of creating a more equal world, things that progressives believe in. And this is the main theme of today. If you are, and I wouldn't consider myself one of you, I am just pointing out things that you might want to pay attention to. As a person, I'm a libertarian. I'm much more conservative on many issues, and also against many of the dear, the dear goals that are part of the progressive agenda, things like Medicare for all and student loan forgiveness. I'm 100% against them. But you have to understand, and some of you already do understand, that you're not going to get any of that from Biden. In fact, if you voted for Biden with the expectation that he would give you some of this, you're probably going to be disappointed. And here is Kim Iverson explaining it. Now, Kim Iverson, she said on Facebook that she also does not believe in the process that happened last week with the election. But here she's talking a little bit about what Biden is going to do as he gets into office.
So this really got my attention. I saw this article this morning and I thought, oh my gosh, okay, here we go. I mean, this is exactly what I anticipated. What I expected was that a Biden administration would be all more of the same. And Joe Biden told us this during the election. I mean, he was saying, look, nothing will fundamentally change, and he means it. So going back in time, it turns out that Democrats have been taking more money from Wall Street than Republicans since Obama, as I mentioned. This one, I want to point out, this is an article from, now this one is Politico, and this was 2 years ago. And here it is. Wall Street shifts to Democrats. This is 2 years ago. Wall Street shifts to Democrats. Barack Obama in 2008 outraised John McCain from the securities and investment industry, and Democrats overall raised more from Wall Street during that cycle. Since then, the industry shifted more of its money back to the GOP, especially during former private equity executive Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign. But according to the Center for Responsive Politics, Wall Street has shifted back in Democrats' direction despite all the deregulation from the Trump administration and GOP Congress. Goes on to say, why is this? The shift back to near parity for Republicans and Democrats from the securities industry reflects industry-wide discomfort with the Trump-era GOP, both due to the president's culture war battles and his trade and immigration policies. So that's really interesting. So basically what they're saying is that Wall Street started giving more money to Barack Obama in 2008 than they were to Republicans. So you have to ask yourselves, why were they doing that? Probably because they knew that Barack Obama would be softer on them. We had the economic crash in 2008. They wanted to, I think at that point, I don't even know if they knew if Obama would be softer on them or if Obama did try, I think, with the Dodd-Frank Act, but that ultimately got watered down. But still, I think they were saying, look, we can't just give money to one side. We got to give money to both sides if we want to make sure both sides are in our corner. It is smarter to give to both sides because it's not about politics for the big money interests. They don't care. They don't care about your morality. They don't care about that. They only care about their bottom line. So give to both. And
So this is Kim Iverson. She is a far, far left progressive. Most of her views I don't really agree with. She's an honest progressive. And I would say Glenn Greenwald, regardless of what you think about his personal politics and his lifestyle and his beliefs, is not a liar when it comes to the things that he's talking about concerning the Biden and Harris ticket and the connection between the DNC and Wall Street and all of the other, all the other betrayals that they do to the progressive and liberal agendas. So I already gave you, I know it's been a little long, but we have Majid Nawaz, liberal critic. He's pointing out the issues with the election process, and he's been railing against the Biden campaign and his past connections to China and Hunter Biden and everything. You also have Jonathan Turley talking about the issues with actually letting the process go run its full course with the courts. And you also have Rod Blagojevich, who I think I'll leave out today, but he has said that yes, there is a lot of fraud that happens in many of these Democratic-run elections, especially in inner cities, as he was the governor of Illinois. Obviously, he served time in prison for a different issue. It was, I believe, an issue of selling a seat in the Senate, Barack Obama's seat. But I am going to run through, hopefully in the next 5 to 10 minutes, the main pillars of why Biden is going to destroy liberalism in his quest to punish conservatives. And it's not really that complicated to understand. The first issue is criminal justice, and it's both his issues and Kamala Harris's issues. Now, I do want to say, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the Joe Biden issues, but you have, and they're already playing stuff from John Ossoff, this Senate candidate in Georgia, because they're trying to get him to win the primary and flip the Senate. But in any case, ABC News says Kamala Harris dual roles and mixed record with the death penalty. Kamala Harris has a varied record on the death penalty despite her claims. When Representative Tulsi Gabbard used the spotlight of the debate stage recently, so this was in 2019, to accuse Senator Kamala Harris of withholding key evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row during her time as California Attorney General, Harris fired back a stern retort. My entire career I have been personally opposed to the death penalty, Harris said, and that has never changed. Harris has consistently voiced that view, but advocates on both sides say her actual approach to cases involving the death penalty, long a politically treacherous issue in California, has been far more complicated. There's a mixed record, said Robert Dunham, executive director of the Death Penalty Information Center. There are instances where as district attorney she decided not to seek the death penalty, and there are other instances where she as attorney general took steps that made it more difficult for a potentially innocent person to get access to evidence that could get to the truth. Ultimately, Dunham told ABC News, the judgment for the voter is to try to determine whether the candidate's beliefs are genuine. It says here, during her 2000 bid for the office of San Francisco District Attorney, Harris was a rising political star who campaigned in part on the promise that she would never seek the death penalty. It was a popular stance with voters there, but it was a promise that would almost immediately be tested. Harris was just 3 months into the job when a 22-year-old gang member named David Hill shot and killed a young on-duty police officer, Isaac Espinosa. Calls for the death penalty rang out from community members and politicians alike. 2 days after Espinosa's death and 2 days before Espinosa's funeral, Harris held a joint press conference with the then head of the San Francisco Police Union, where she announced that she would not seek the death penalty for Hill. And so that led to some outrage from some of the critics of her from the right. Now, in 2010, Harris had ascended to a larger political stage, becoming California's top prosecutor. Capital punishment has long been a divisive issue statewide. Polling currently shows that 61% of California support the death penalty as a possible punishment for serious crimes. The case that Gabbard may have been referring to on the debate stage was that of convicted murderer Kevin Cooper, who was sentenced to death for a quadruple homicide in San Bernardino, California in 1983. When asked by ABC News whether Cooper's case was what Gabbard was referring to during the debate, an aide for Gabbard's campaign said that Cooper was one of the names of people Kamala Harris tried to keep in prison, even though there was evidence to suggest they might be innocent. The aide also listed the names of other individuals who are not on death row and not discussed in this reporting. Cooper was convicted of killing a couple, their young daughter and her friend, a young boy who was sleeping over at the family's home in Chino Hills, California. The couple's 8-year-old son survived the attack and was found with a knife wound across his neck. During the sentencing phase of the case and in later appeals, Cooper's attorney alleged that evidence had been tampered with or manipulated, and the defense argued that the description of the attacker offered by the only surviving victim did not resemble Cooper. So then there's all this process of appeals. Cooper's attorneys then motioned to have the appeal reheard before the entire bench of Ninth Circuit judges, a motion which was also denied. 5 judges opposed that denial in a strongly worded dissent. The state of California may be about to execute an innocent man, the dissenting opinion said. The question of Harris' actions surfaced later when Cooper and his lawyers asked the state to approve additional DNA testing, which they argued could exonerate him. Harris's team did not take up the case, and evidence from the crime scene was never re-examined while Harris held state office. Cooper's attorney objected to the decision, citing it in a 2016 clemency request. So, for those of you that believe in civil liberties, and I personally am not a fan of the death penalty, I think it should be, basically, I think it's better to actually not have the death penalty. You now have a person who is basically conveniently supporting or opposing the imposition of the death penalty based on her whim, meaning that she has not actually done the full committed work in order to help death row inmates who might be innocent to avoid the death penalty. It's not enough if you're a prosecutor to say, oh, I am not going to seek the death penalty in cases where I am prosecuting a defendant. In order to actually make any change, you also have to assess what's going on with some of the cases that have already been adjudicated and where there are appeals, because the death penalty doesn't just affect people who might be prosecuted in the future, it affects people who were prosecuted in the past. And the fact is that evidence standards in the past, back in the 80s and 70s, were weaker than they are today. So it's actually more likely that somebody who's already on death row had a wrongful conviction because of standards of evidence and science and DNA and all sorts of other forensic techniques that have come about since then, than it is that a new defendant would be wrongfully convicted. That is something that people should keep in mind. The other issue is with foreign policy, and we are going to talk a little bit about, Joe Biden. He's saying it's the end of America first, how Biden says he will re-engage with the world. Those who have known President-elect Joseph Biden Jr., they used his full name, for decades say they expect him to move carefully, providing reassurance with a few big symbolic acts. And then he says so Biden says he will make Russia pay a price for what he says have been disruptions and attempts to influence elections, including his own. What that means, nobody knows. During Trump's time in office, the Democrats repeatedly made it an issue that he wasn't being specific about certain things, about how Mexico is going to pay for the wall, about how he's going to get the jobs back and everything like that, and how he was going to renegotiate NAFTA. And lo and behold, after 4 years, you do have renegotiated NAFTA, you do have the wall mostly built, and you also have some of the jobs coming back from overseas. We're not going to call Donald Trump the perfect example of a person who accomplished all his goals, but the fact is that he accomplished at least a few of his goals, and people are aware of it. With Joe Biden, we don't even know what some of the goals are. And he's even said this. He said, so while foreign allies may find Mr. Biden reassuring and smiled when they heard him say in a town hall meeting that America first has made America alone, they also concede that they may never fully trust that the United States will not lurch back to building walls. In interviews in the past several weeks, Mr. Biden's top advisors began to outline a restoration that might be called the Great Undoing, an effort to reverse course on Mr. Trump's aggressive attempt to withdraw to American borders. You know what that means? It means effectively, if you are a liberal, you are now supporting a person, Joe Biden, who wants a more interventionist foreign policy. He wants America to be involved more in Latin America, the Middle East, and the Far East. More involved and to commit more resources to there. Whether we like it or not, the world simply does not organize itself, said Antony J. Blinken, Mr. Biden's longtime national security advisor, until the Trump administration and Democratic and Republican administrations. The United States did a lot of that organizing, and we made some mistakes along the way for sure. And they continue. Now, however, so that's end quote. Now, however, the United States has discovered what happens, quote, when some other country tries to take our place, or maybe even worse, no one does, and you end up with a vacuum that is filled by bad events. Analyze that statement. When Biden was vice president, you had ISIS running buck wild. When Biden was vice president, supposedly Russia succeeded in hacking our election under his watch and under Obama's watch. When Obama was vice president, Russia succeeded in taking Crimea. When Biden and Obama were in the White House, right, Iran was basically getting all sorts of incentives for a deal that had no enforcement mechanisms. When Biden and Obama were in the White House, you had the Arab Spring, where chaos just erupted everywhere throughout the Middle East. Millions and millions of lives lost under an administration that supposedly says, oh, there is a vacuum now that Donald Trump is in office. I'm sorry, the Arab Spring happened in 2011 when Barack Obama and Joe Biden were in office. The pink tide happening in Latin America happened under Bush and Obama. All of these events that led the United States to be seen as an interventionist busybody were under other administrations and not under Donald Trump. So they can blame him for his character issues. They can blame him for his improper statements. They can blame him for being a liar on certain issues, but they cannot blame Donald Trump for the chaos that they helped to create when they were in the White House. So that's basically what we're going to be seeing. We're going to see at 77, Mr. Biden has his own Back to the Future vision of how to dispense with, quote, America first. This is the time to tap the strength and audacity that took us to victory in 2 world wars and brought down the Iron Curtain, he wrote in. So basically, he's behaving as if we are now in a new Cold War and we're going to be re-engaging in conflicts all over the world, just as if it was 1978 and Russia was invading Afghanistan. I think it was 79. In either case, you are talking about an administration that will bring us back to an era when the CIA and all of the national security agencies were basically doing whatever they wanted, and we didn't know whether they were doing it legally. We didn't know that whether it was in the interest of American national security because they wouldn't tell us, and we didn't know whether it was going to blow back, as with what happened in Afghanistan and in Vietnam and in other places throughout the world. And that is something that, as a liberal or progressive or anyone else, conservative, independent, Democrat or Republican, you should look at that as something that will cost the lives and health of people all over the world and here. It's going to cost the lives and health of our soldiers, and it's going to cost the same thing for people overseas, including many civilians, children, elderly, the sick. It is not a Democrat or Republican issue. Mr. Biden, once he takes office, is going to initiate a new Cold War based on this article, not from Breitbart and not from Counterpunch, from the New York Times. Okay? The other thing that we have to talk about and is their relationship to domestic surveillance. Okay? And I don't have an article pulled up, but everything that we saw exposed over the past 4 years in terms of FISA warrants, and before that, in terms of NSA surveillance with Edward Snowden and with Julian Assange, and by the way, Glenn Greenwald, all of those issues that the Obama-Biden administration got away with when they were in power then, they're going to get away with it again because they have no a mechanism that disciplines anyone for breaking the law, for warrantless searches, for invasion of privacy, for violating the Fourth Amendment. We are, as a society, going into a Black Mirror situation, or the enemy of the state. If you remember that movie from 1997, I believe, with Will Smith, where you as a citizen, your personal safety, your personal privacy, all of the things that you cherish, the idea that you can go out of your house and go to school or go to your grocery store or buy something online, or even the things that you talk about with people that you're having a drink with, none of those things are safe from the government's eavesdropping. Okay, so let's say you use recreational drugs. Let's say that you own some sort of weapons that maybe they're trying to make illegal. Let's say that you might have made a mistake on your taxes. All of those issues are now fair game because of the power of the surveillance state left unchecked by the Democratic Party and the Republican Party that did nothing to repeal the Patriot Act, that did nothing to fight the Comeys and Brennans and Clappers and the deep state swamp things that Obama and Biden had as their main henchmen. The other thing I want to talk about is the just amazing journalism that we're going to see. You're already seeing a little bit of it, and it is basically I have to allow ads, but like if you didn't like the challenging tone of the journalistic class, the Fifth Estate under Donald Trump, don't worry. Under Biden, it's not going to be that way. Here's NBC News. Sorry, I had a cough there. Don't put me on lockdown, Joe Biden. Biden's bringing the big dogs to the White House, German Shepherds, Champ, and Major. The fur is set to fly again after Trump became the first president in more than a century to go petless. This is what Joe Biden is being covered on. His pets. Are you serious? Are you shitting me? Okay? And this is something that, by the way, I saw when Elizabeth Warren ran for office. When she ran for, in fact, I can try to pull it up. So she had, this was a couple years ago. So this was from Business Insider, and it says, Elizabeth Warren's dog, Bailey, endorses a burrito. This is not news. Nobody cares about a U.S. senator's dog, okay? I have neighbors. They have, I think, 3 dogs, and they're great. And I have no problem with them walking their dog around here. I think dogs are amazing. I don't care if your senator or your congressman has a dog. Nobody gives a shit, okay? But this is what they're writing about because they don't want to write about the actual issues that these people are supposed to be dealing with, because then they would have to discuss why they're failing on them. And more than that, maybe Kamala Harris is allergic to dogs because instead they're still talking about her Converse sneakers. This is something that when she ran for in the primaries for president, they were talking about her stupid Converse sneakers, as if anybody cares whether you have Converse sneakers or Nikes or Adidas. Nobody cares. Okay? The media cares for some reason. They were talking about it when she was nominated for vice president, and now that she's supposedly vice president elect, they're talking about it again. So, yes, this is the media that you're supposed to expect to hold these people accountable after 4 years of how they treated the president that's there now. Are you shitting me? Do you think that that is an equitable, treatment of different people? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And you should be downright you should be apoplectic that this is the way the media treats one candidate as opposed to another day to day. And then we have to talk at least a little bit about how some of these congressional Democrats are saying that they want to cancel people who worked for Trump and possibly even supported them. AOC wants to cancel those who worked for Trump. Good luck with that, they say. Now, I'm not saying good luck with that. I'm saying if they try to do this, we will see civil unrest on an unprecedented scale. I don't think that this is something to be to react with a lot of bravado about, because we don't know what type of chaos and bloodshed this could unleash. Over the weekend, people started making lists. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez kicked things off on Friday with a tweet that terrified the Trump world. Is anyone archiving these Trump sycophants for when they try to downplay or deny their complicity in the future, she wrote. I foresee decent probability of many deleted tweets, writings, photos in the future. A group calling itself the Trump Accountability Project sprung up to heed AOC's call. Remember what they did, the group's sparse website declares. We should not allow the following groups of people to profit from their experience: those who elected him, those who staffed his government, those who funded him. Rarely a healthy sign in any democracy, the enemies list started to freak out some normally unflappable Trump officials in the White House. At first, I brushed it off as ridiculous, but what is scary is that she's serious, said the White House official of AOC's tweet. That is terrifying that a sitting member of Congress is calling for something like that. I believe there is a life after this in politics for Trump officials, but the idea that a sitting member of Congress wants to purge from society and ostracize us should scare the American people. It definitely should scare the American people more than it scares me. That type of rhetoric is terrifying when you have 70 million Americans who voted for this president. It might start with Trump's officials, but what if they go further? So that, again, it's an illiberal idea that you go and target your political enemies for retribution simply because they voted a different way, simply based on no other crime. It's not as if they deleted classified information from their server, things that they and did things that were explicitly illegal. Nothing that the Trump administration officials that she's talking about did is explicitly illegal. She's referring to them having supported or worked for him. That is the most illiberal side of the administration that is to come, and I don't think that it's limited to AOC, who's not part of the administration, but will certainly be taking part in a few of the decisions, or at least interacting with them. And I'm sure that there are Democrats who are closer to the trough who have the same idea, but they're keeping it to themselves. Remember the IRS auditing scandal under Obama. And then finally, the last two actually that I want to talk about are the issues of racial harmony and the abandonment of populism. Okay, racial harmony under the Democrats did not go very far under President Obama. You have to remember that under him, the Black Lives Matter movement sprung up because suddenly, with a black president in office, people were saying, well, this thing that happened with Trayvon Martin, we need a national movement in order to purge the entire society of people like George Zimmerman. The same thing with Ferguson. All of those things that happened were under President Obama. The same thing with Baltimore. We remember that Baltimore was ripped apart by riots in 2015 after the death of Freddie Gray in custody, which wasn't a police shooting, by the way. It was he died in police custody. All of these things that happened under Obama were not solved by Obama. And the truth is they weren't solved by Trump, because Trump is not responsible for the conduct of your local police force, just like Obama was not responsible for the conduct of your local police force. Under the Biden-Harris or Harris-Biden administration, once again, pick up your t-shirts, you will see basically that issue shelved and then brought out whenever it's convenient. They will always, always, always try to use the issue of police violence when they are doing poorly in the polls or when they have issues with critics within the progressive movement, critics within the administration itself who might say, well, look, I mean, I had goals and they're not accomplishing anything. It's going to be weaponized and we're going to see more riots. Just it'll depend when it's convenient for them to happen. And certainly those types of things are issues that the Democrats, I feel, they have not exhausted their exploitation of police citizen violence involving black suspects. In terms of populism, right? So liberalism and populism are a little different. Generally, I don't think liberals would consider themselves populists, but some of them do. And the fact is that when they rejected populism under Donald Trump, some of these people, like Thomas Frank, were saying, "Wait a second, you said as some of these people who, you believe you're the party of the workers, you're the party of the you're the party of women, you're the party of the undertrodden, of the working class, you're the party of all of those elements of society that don't have corporate donors to look out for their interests." The fact of the matter is that Thomas Frank, he's not quite talking about the election yet, but he is assuming that Biden's going to be president, and he's already been predicting that the government under Biden is basically going to give a huge middle finger to the populists within the Democratic Party, and they're going to say, well, we are the experts, and they've already been saying it. They're already talking about appointing Rahm Emanuel to a cabinet post. Rahm Emanuel is the exact opposite of the populist. He's been in administrations and in Congress since the 80s. They're talking about putting his brother Ezekiel Emanuel as Secretary of Health and Human Services. They are talking about, the Democrats, listen here, putting Meg Whitman in as Secretary of Commerce, a person who was the CEO of Hewlett Packard. So the notion that as a Democrat, if you voted for Joe Biden, you are electing a person who will look out for the interests of working people and unions and the minimum wage and maternity leave and Medicare for all. It's all bunk. It's not going to happen. They're moving away from it already. Dream on. It's over. So you might as well fork over the money, buy your Touched by Biden t-shirt right here. You can find, here's the design right behind me, right? So you can buy one of these, and I also want you to like this video, subscribe to the channel. I don't care whether you are on BitChute or on Rumble or on Odyssey, but especially I want you to subscribe to the Razor Sharp News Chronicle. And I hope you have a great day and be well.